Welcome to the next episode of Comedy Guy. In the studio here, I have Martin Rauam. And Martin is, he's done a bunch of stuff, interesting things we're going to talk about. He is a former Estonian rally driver. No doubt he still drives. I always weird saying former to things as well. You're a former, you used to, but not anymore. And also right now is one of the partners at event company YOLOS. They do a lot of corporate events and putting on other events. Also head of the, event association. What do we call it in English?
Marketing association.
Marketing association for events specifically.
No, it kind of covers all of marketing.
Oh, okay.
Just event marketing is part of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Just get that microphone a little bit closer to your face like that. There we go.
Yeah.
I thought we would just, I've known Martin and I have worked together a bit over the years, and I thought we'd come in. First of all, we're going to talk about rally driving, because who doesn't love that? And then we'll talk a little bit about events and how events are in the current time in October 2021. What's the feeling? The wall's closing in again. So Martin, welcome. Thanks for making the time. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, let's get started. First of all, what's happening this week? What are you doing in a regular week these days?
Well, I am a guy called kind of a creative manager, creative leader of event agency. We're one of the leading in the market, as the market has kind of opened up in the last few months. It's been quite a busy time. Mm-hmm. I would say so. It's been quite hectic, planning the winter and next year again as well. But what I usually do is just kind of lead the creative team to come up with stuff and kind of try to keep the agency running. That's the main thing I do.
So is that, you've got a customer, you're doing that high level stuff with the customer, setting that broad vision for what their corporate event will be?
Yeah, I'm more kind of on a strategy side on the creative department. So my job usually is to kind of work with the initial brief and kind of understand what are the goals and then, how to kind of set the whole thing up and kind of lead the creative team to come up with an idea. Then kind of present it to the client and, get to a point where we actually know what are we, trying to achieve here and what needs to be done. And then kind of babysit the whole thing until the very production phase to make sure that producers don't eat the creative idea, which sometimes can happen.
Sure. Okay. In implementation, the idea and the concept can take different roads.
Yeah, it is, because usually the ideas are kind of... they're undoable usually. It's like too big idea and too small budget usually. So so producers are making a suicide once they see the actual, what has been sold to a client. But in the end, it kind of, comes together somewhere in the middle. So it just needs to make sure that happens and kind of lead the team and the agency generally with a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
Right. And you were one of the founders of YOLOS, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Who else was founding it with you back in 2009?
2009, yeah. So it's something like 12, 13 years already. Been doing quite a while, and it's been growing quite fast. So yeah, nowadays we kind of do a lot of corporate stuff that's related to kind of a bigger startups and stuff like that. So we do like Bolt and Wise and Volt, the global Volt, plus banks, telecoms, lots of government stuff, Enterprise Estonia stuff, etc. So basically, we do everything that's related to corporate communication that requires events.
Sure.
So basically, it's a communication business. We just use events as a tool to kind of, talk about what needs to be said, basically, to clients or employees.
And I guess, a great example of that, maybe people who have probably, if you watch my podcast or listen to my podcast, you've probably seen the Work in Estonia clips that we did recently, the Steve Owen inspired Crocodile Hunter ones. They were through, I was working in collaboration with YOLOS.
That's a good example of, that was actually like the idea that came out from our creative department. So this is, how we usually do it. It's been doing great, actually, the videos. I've heard them, flying around, showing them in different places, and it's kind of, went beyond that we actually, anticipated. So
and credit to YOLOS there in that what I was impressed in that the client, it was me, I think I was working with Oliver mostly on that one. that when we were, he got me involved. He was asking for me, working with me. How could I do this? Could we do this? Do that? But it was sort of like it seemed like the client gave us a fair bit of creative freedom on that one. They were like, implement this. And that I really liked, that there wasn't, the client is very supportive. Enterprise Estonia, very happy to be a partner with them, but they certainly weren't like over our shoulder every moment, like, what are you doing? And that allowed us, I think, because they were cool and trusted YOLOS and trusted me working with you, that I think a great result came out of that because of that trust.
Yeah, I think it's, they're cool people and it is kind of a government-related agency, basically, like Enterprise Estonia, but it's, overall, it's like pushing startups and investments around Estonia. So all of these people are kind of, quite open-minded and really cool people to work with, and we've been doing, work with them for a few years now. So I think the trust has kind of built up, and sometimes it's the case that if we present an idea, you might be like, okay, does this really work? Anyway, at some point, we just, tell that, bear with us, it will work. And if you, do it few cycles, then the trust is going to come. So, but usually you're as good as the last thing you did. So,
wow, that sounds similar to stand-up comedy. I can understand that one.
Yeah.
What I want to get to Martin, is something I didn't know about you until I'd worked with you for quite some time, is your history as a rally driver in Estonia. Yeah. So as I understood now, all I did is I went and checked the WRC official log. So I got some idea of your history, the cars you've driven and stuff like that. So it was about 96. How did this begin? Paint us this story of how you get into, because it's, you need a lot of equipment to start rally driving. It's not just like,
Yeah, well, there are different roads you can choose. I personally never kind of chose the rally driving as a profession. It kind of, came step by step, kind of, sneaking in. It all began with, driving tractors and, Jeeps on the field when I was like 7 years old or something like that.
Okay.
So it kind of went from there into a place where kind of my parents, especially my dad, kind of realized that, I can drive a car and I have some free time during the vacation from the school. So he kind of, got me into some ice driving and some, simple stuff like that.
Was that just like he did it yourself? He did it with you, and so he took you out.
He never was a rally driver himself.
Sure. But
it's
still,
not kind of a family thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually, most common ways people end up as a rally driver is that your dad is a driver, and you kind of go from there. But I'm the only one in my family who's ever been involved with that. Besides my brother a little as well after me. But anyway, it kind of went from, I think the first thing was that the dad bought himself an old Zhiguli or something to drive around in on the lake, or just for fun. And, he kind of brought me with him, and I was having a go. And at some point they realized that, I'm good at it. And they thought that, okay, let's, do it again sometime. And it kind of went from there to a point where we kind of, met the people who were actually rally drivers, kind of helping us with just, random stuff with the cars. And, they were like, I have a real car here as well. It was all kind of a rear wheel drive, like really simple cars that, just give it a try. And it kind of went from there. You kind of build up into higher levels with the better cars. Whereas you get to a point where you start to do some competitions. If that goes well, you do it again, something like that. So at some point we kind of found ourselves in a position that, okay, that this could be something. And it was back in the days where Marco Martin was kind of, doing his first big steps back in 2000, 2001, something like that. So the rallying was really in the picture, and the money was moving in the sport. So it kind of went from there.
How do you start? Like back when you were, I'm interested in that point of going from you're just practicing or you're doing tests or to actually getting into a league. So first of all, what were the, I don't know what you call them in rally, leagues or categories? There's the top category, okay, with the top guys in the country. And then there's obviously, it's usually a junior league or something.
Yeah, you mean like ladder. Kind of the steps. Well, now there are some logical steps that you can take, but in the really beginning, it's actually quite a messy thing. There are different sports you can take part in. I started as a Rallycross driver, which actually takes place on a track. So there's no codriver there, and it's similar to formulas, but it's just drive on the dirt. which was a really big thing on the Soviet times in Estonia. So there was a lot of heritage there, and old people who knew how it used to be. So, but yeah, I think it was all down to having a right kind of a club of people around you. So I kind of ended up with few of my first instructors who actually were rally drivers themselves. So they kind of took me with them to events and stuff like that. So I kind of saw it as a mechanic and all of that. So, at some point, I was really young back then. So we were talking about being like 14, 15, something like that. So I ended up in, and actually the real rally that we, see nowadays, like the WRC thing, doesn't have this kind of a really entry-level championships at all. So usually people, start with Rallycross or go-karts or stuff like that to build themselves up. And at some point we got to a point where I was a bit too young to actually drive on actual rally, because you need a driving license for that.
Okay.
I was 16 or 17, something like that. So, and I was kind of an exception back in that time, because there weren't any drivers who were that young, kind of ready to go on the actual rally. So what they did is drive a zero car, which is basically a safety car that drives in front of the competitors, which basically is you're a referee, basically, just driving through the stages to make sure they're okay. Did that on, I think it was 2000 something. And then when we watched the times, the referee car is actually a referee. You're not allowed to kind of race full out.
Okay, yeah.
But you can still go fast, because you can't be too slow, otherwise the cars are going to catch you. So what we realized in the end, that I was driving a Hyundai Coupe, I think the front wheel drive car, on a rally on the same roads that now Rally Estonia is happening. And when we looked our times in the end, because it's not officially timed, the zero car, compared our times to the competitors, we were like second in our class or something like that, front wheel drive class. So I even remember got a call from Estonian Autosport Union. It's like, slow down, fuck, that's not a fucking zero car. So yeah, it kind of went from there. And then, when I got 17, I got the driver's license, and I was already jumped into four-wheel drive car when I was 17, driving like the full Estonian championships. Got silver on that same year, which was like a huge achievement at the time, because it was like a full spec four-wheel drive car, which you could, overall results were like you were in
which
top
car
5.
was that? Which
Subaru Impreza.
Okay.
So yeah, then I kind of wrestled around with these Subarus and stuff for a few years.
So
Estonia.
is that, and by that stage, that first, when you're going in that first competition, I'm going to understand the structure of rally, at least then. Like there was a team set up and you came into the team, or how does it get formed? Or are you paying for the car, or?
Usually you have to find money. Yeah, that's
you've got to
thing.
find money. Okay.
It's a bit different. Where does the money actually come from? From the beginning, you usually have to have, family, friends. Basically it's like investing in a startup. Okay. The family, friends are fools are the first investors. It's the same within any sport, basically. So, luckily we were in a position to, and in the very beginning, it's not that expensive as well. It is like expensive in like, if you compare it to a regular car or something like that, but it's not like millions we're talking about. So, at some point you get to a point where kind of family, friends, and fools is not enough.
Sure.
So you got to find sponsors, and this is where it actually gets difficult, and this is where most of the people stop as well, because it's just impossible. And I think the steps are super deep. Like the first few steps are quite easy because they don't require that much money, and nowadays you can drive a buggy or run a cross cart or what do you have. They're not that expensive, but when do you get your actual rally? Then the steps are gonna be super huge. So yeah, money is a big issue in this sport.
So how did you make that leap to getting that? Did you get some sponsors on board?
Eventually, yes. Okay. It was all the funding of a rally driving. Usually, it's not that about it. Basically, is a marketing business.
Sure.
Everything that happens in WRC is basically marketing of the car brands. But if you go on a lower level, it's more about kind of relations and kind of a PR thing. drivers and teams are using sponsors as more as a kind of a club kind of a system. So what it means is that if you're a rich company or something and you want to sponsor a rally driver and you do events with them, you put their sponsors in the car and drive them around and they're happy. And so it's not that kind of a logo on the car thing that people are gonna buy your product based on the logo you saw in a car, but the actual atmosphere and the kind of message that comes along with it. So usually it all comes down to relations, and I think we were really lucky with that we knew right people, and my father has a big role in it as well, being at the right place at the right time. I think
I've often wondered that about sport. How does sport at some level get kickstarted? Because I was watching, I forget where it was, but it's for example, the Tallink Tennis Center out in Lasnamäe. Like, why the fuck would Tallink need to sponsor a tennis center? But as I understand, there's some will from management. It's not like they did market research and Tallink worked out the tennis players are the ones. No, it's some will from management.
I would say that most of the sports sponsoring in Estonia works like that.
Okay.
If the manager himself is a fan of golf, then sponsor a golf tournament. If you look at the rallying as well, after me, guys that came along, most of the guys were like, well-connected families, I would say. So you kind of get the wheels turning. Even if we talk about Marco Martin, like the first things, he did, coming from nowhere, basically, didn't have a personal, huge backing or something like that. But he met the right people, codriver knew a lot of people. So you kind of get a sponsorship on board, not based on the actual logo on a car, but based on the connections and people who think it's the thing you do, and they want to hang along. It's kind of a more mentoring style of a business than just sponsorship.
Oh, okay. So they might actually take an active role, like the sponsor wants to kind of maybe even get to know you or something, and be an active, feel like they're really part of this.
Well, Oleg Ross is a big supporter of Oitanak. No much of a reason. I don't believe that people are actually going to buy more stuff from Gross's shop thanks to Oitanak.
Sure.
But Oleg just likes the thing he does, and his son is driving as well.
Okay. So you started off because I mean, at least as I said, the best I know of your history was just looking at some official results, because I could see a bunch. It was, first of all, it said you're in a Lada at first. Yeah. Was this the early Rallycross stuff or something?
Yeah. Usually people started with the Ladas because back in the days,
that
was the simplest thing you do.
Mm-hmm. And then into a Hyundai, and then I saw into
there was a bunch of Subarus.
Yeah.
Different kinds, mostly Imprezas. And then it ended up in Mitsubishi Lancers in the last few years, which was already like in a world level. So basically, we kind of climbed up the ladder until 2006. Won Estonian, like basically everything in Estonia. There's Estonian championships, like in overall group and everything like that with the teams. And kind of graduated to WRC. And then spent 2 years in a WRC support championship that you now call like WRC2, basically.
Okay.
Back in the days, it was called Production WRC.
Mm-hmm. So before we jump to the final bit of the story there, so by the time you're in the Imprezas, you're sort of in the, like it's proper by then. It's proper. There's some sponsors there. There's some money. You're doing proper. Not to say the rest of it isn't proper, but as you said, you were progressing up and going step by step. How does it go? For example, how did you meet your co-driver? How does that relationship build?
There are a bunch of co-drivers that hang around,
okay,
kind of in a group. But you just get to know people basically because it was 14 years I did this sport from the really early age. So this was all my life basically. So I knew everybody who knew everybody. So it's big shortage of good co-drivers, I would say. If you talk about the top level people, because it is a hard work. It's not just sitting there and having fun.
Yeah, lay it out, because to most you watch it on the TV, like the guy just reads off the map. What's Walk us through what a co-driver does, like, and maybe in the whole event, not just when you're in the car.
Yeah, the whole event, there are a million of details that you have to do. You have to navigate yourself through the whole week, basically. How to know when to be where at exactly the right minute, how to get there, plus a million details related to, things that drivers have to memorize, basically. So the driver's only job is to drive. Okay. You drive straight until it tells you. You don't need to think anything more. So basically, he or she is kind of a babysitter of a driver. Make sure that the driver is on a top shape at the right time. One thing, of course, is the actual stage itself. Like when you're racing, it's comparable to, like in musical terms, like one is playing violin and the other one is kind of reading the notes. The violin player himself doesn't kind of see the notes. So what you need to do is kind of tell the right note at the right time. So because if you cannot tell them like too early, because driver is just an animal who will forget quite easily. And if you're late, then you're late. So it's not that easy thing to do, actually. Another thing is when you go like on the actual world level, then there's a bunch of regulations and all of that. You have to be aware of how to do that. So I would say that an experience, of course, is a huge part of it. You're like a psychological kind of a mentor of a driver there as well, etc. So there are two people in the car, and if they don't click, it doesn't work. So in that sense, I think even in Estonia nowadays, if you're trying to find a good co-driver for like WRC events, there's just few names basically around, and it's not that we don't have that many good people. It's just that you don't get really experience because there isn't too many drivers to kind of take you along. But yeah, I had some cool guys with me that we worked for years, and it's kind of a marriage thing, because you spend so much time together. Especially in the WRC, you're kind of away from home most of the time and traveling and all of that. So long days in the car together. So in the, back in the days where you didn't have the iPods and phones with you, you just have to talk to people, which is a really special relationship. Actually, you can trust the person like blindly, basically. And some people doesn't click, it doesn't work. But yeah, I think. At some point, they're underestimated, definitely, the co-driver's job, because people think that they're kind of replaceable. And in some degree, they are. But still, there isn't...
Only if you can replicate that relationship. Only if you can replicate that clicking, then possibly.
Yeah, of course. And then, of course, if you can be the world's best co-driver, but if the driver is shit, then you're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. But if you're the world's best driver and the co-driver is shit, then most probably you're not going to win championships. You can win stages maybe, and that's it.
Okay, and you're driving it as also you're driving the Impreza WRX. I mean, that's the classic. For me, that 2000 era WRX is really that shape, that the 555 shape is, I don't know, maybe because I was 20 years old back then and losing my mind.
It is a beautiful car, I have to say. That's kind of a classic. It's a lot of to do with Colin McRae, I think, and kind of the games that kind of came along on that era. I must agree that this kind of these sashes are one of the best that there are, and they sounded different, and it was quite a cool thing to have around. I'm shame that at some point they decided to do more kind of a family car out of it.
It did seem to. The next models moved in that direction.
I think it was back to the marketing department made the calls. So.
It did seem like, they were moving to the family car, more middle of the game, where, the early 555 WRX shape, I don't even know what the name of that shape technically was. Yeah, that was racer boy style. That's why we loved it back then.
Yeah. And these cars are really valuable nowadays. Yeah. It's kind of an investment. If you buy one, it's going to be more expensive in a few years. So.
Right. And I imagine if you buy one of those, you got to know what you're looking for, because it could have been thrashed to shit if you're not going through it and making sure that it's in good condition.
Of course. But I think with rally cars, there are some special editions that people, keep, and especially like not so much in Estonia, but like in UK and Ireland and countries like that. There are special kind of collectors who deal with that, old rally cars, and they even have like cars back from the 80s, like the B group monsters, are still around and they're actually drivable. So, which is quite cool. So yeah, you can actually buy them if you want to.
Dang. Do you have anything in your garage left?
Not really, because at some point when we finalized my career, then I would say that the end part was quite kind of a tricky, or there's a lot of people think that this being a rally driver is a really cool profession to have, and this is something that every boy wants to do, and in a way it's right. On the other hand, most people don't see the work being done under the blanket, basically. So it's just the tip of an iceberg, the actual stage that you drive in. And most of the things are related to, the finance we already talked about, which is like pain in the ass to then try to cover that. So in that sense, I stopped my career in the last recession, basically at the same time as most of the drivers of my era kind of stopped. Urmo Aava was driving together in the same championships with Urmo, and it all went down to the very same place in super fast in like a few months basically. So in the end, I kind of ended up with loans I couldn't pay, and being something like 23 or 4 of age, I was smart. I did have a university degree as well, but still, I haven't worked a day in my life like anywhere else, and I was like, at some point, flying around the world, we had events in New Zealand, Argentina, Japan, places like that, Mexico, flying around and driving, super fast cars, jumping in the forest with other guys. And then the next point, I was like in a train station, and I didn't have a road car to kind of go home, basically, and no job and stuff and like that. So I was like, okay.
You mean when you transitioned out of it, or just that it was like it was taking all your money as well?
Because at some point, you kind of, every time you kind of think that, okay, that it's going to come back, and when do you stop actually? So, and I think it's a big problem with a lot of different athletes in Estonia as well, that, once you're, and it's more kind of psychological, I would say, because athlete is a trained animal. They're kind of into one goal in their life. They're actually really good achievers, but the problem is they don't know anything else besides their own thing. So once this stops at some point, psychologically it's super hard, because like socially you've been someone, you're in the news all the time and kind of get somewhere. There are the lucky ones who are like Olympic gold medalists or stuff like that, so they kind of get the position for life. But like 90% of athletes never get there. So it's a big problem that what do you do after that, and kind of, have you only been in the gym for all of your life, or you still have something else you can do or whatever. So in my terms, it was kind of a logical transition to events, because after I stopped, I was involved for, I think it was a year or two in a thing called World Rally Team Estonia, which was funded by Enterprise Estonia basically. And the initial idea was to kind of promote the Estonian drivers in the WRC. Okay. I originally was a driver there as well in 2008. And once, we stopped, then it was Ott Tänak who actually jumped on board on that. So I was a little bit, doing that thing, which was mainly promoting Estonia in WRC events. So I think the first event ever YOLOS did, second, I think, was, Enterprise Estonia promotion in the Jyväskylä rally in Finland.
Okay.
So it kind of went from there, trying to market.
And so they putting a promotion up at the rally. There was something going on there.
Yeah, something like that. So I knew all of these people back then already, and we did VIP tours and stuff like that. So it kind of went from there. But yeah, what I'm trying to say is that the stopping of an athlete is a thing it's relatively kind of I think it's a problem that's not been talked too much about, because it involves usually a lot of like psychological struggle of trying to find out who you are in life, and it's kind of it could be a big fall at some point. So and another problem is that if you during your career, think about it. Athletes usually don't want to do it because you take the focus away. So in that sense, some of the people stop midway through because they think that, this thing is going too far. You're going to sacrifice everything else. So
what was I guess so you said at least you had a university degree. So there was some feeling with you and your family like, okay, we're at least going to get this, that was a thing.
Yeah, well, because my career when we did the last 2 years in the WRC thing wasn't that basic. We didn't do all the events in the championship. So we had some time, in between the events as well. So we need to do something. So I was, doing some work as well. But yeah, generally I was always the guy in the business who did the thinking as well in a kind of a way that I was trying to communicate with sponsors and come up with the plans and all of that. So I wasn't just a dumb driver to do all of that. So in that sense, I think it wasn't too bad for me in the sense that I knew that I could do something.
Right. Okay. Already talking to sponsors, customers, already knowing how to present them with an idea or a concept.
Yeah,
we're selling
like
you on this idea of being a rally driver.
I thought I was quite good at it. I produced my own marketing materials and materials to promote our team and stuff like that. Now, if I look at these materials now, it's a huge joke. I would say, like
of course.
Now being like a professional communication person. So, but yeah.
What do you think of the particular? So, okay, I mean, this thing about athletes changing. So, right, as you say, it's logical. It's going to happen for most athletes. If they're at the top 10% or whatever that might be, it might seem more logical. They're going to have some media career. They can write the book. They can do the next thing and then or use their status for something. But if you haven't got that high status, then you're trying to use your skills in a new area. You've talked about getting into a different social circles. All you're doing is hanging out with crazy athletes before that who are just hardcore working out. And now you're put back into the real world full of regular people who think in a different way. Are there particular challenges for us in Estonia in this super small market, or is it maybe easier to get noticed because it's a small thing?
Yeah, of course. It's a small, country, city. Everybody knows someone. So, of course, it's a bit easier. And I think even, being an athlete, people understand your personality as well. People, person behind the actual sports person. So in that sense, I know that, some of the people, like athletes during their career already, some sponsors and managers and people kind of, pick them up and support them and give them something to do or whatever. Most of the time athletes go and be involved in the same sport. That's the most common thing you do. In rallying as well, a lot of drivers have, now developed themselves into team managers or something else in the championship, which is logical, especially with other, fields of sports as well. You're going to be a referee,
sure,
a trainer or whatever. So, but I pretty early on kind of, coming back to your question that do I have something in a garage, was that at that point, I was so fed up with all of that. I was like, I don't want to be involved in there anymore because I saw how hard it is. And I saw a lot of, being a driver, which is like the best spot to be in this sport, basically. I wasn't really kind of fancy to be, I was offered different positions in different, areas, but I was more curious about, everything else that was not related to rallying. So I kind of, a few years, and I think it was something to do with, it was a bit of a hard thing to swallow as well. So I didn't want to kind of, be around that much and think about what could have been. So I kind of made a call that, okay, that's it. I kind of draw the line here. I think I've sat in a rally car like twice after the Rally Japan 2008, which was my last proper rally we did. I at the beginning I just didn't want to, and then I got some offers for some smaller cars, doing local championships and stuff like that. But I wasn't too fancied about it because it was like, driving a rally car. The thing is like comparable to if we look at like planes. you're like a fighter jet pilot. And once this is done, they're offering you like an Airbus.
Yeah, okay.
And then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
not the same thing. So I'm not the guy who kind of raced through the town with the fast BMW. I'm cycling more now. But anyway, I have a family car and I don't really, kind of drift around with it. So in that sense, it's been 12 something years now, 13 years. So I kind of don't miss it anymore. I follow it a bit. Most of the rallying thing I do nowadays is related to Rally Estonia, which I'm kind of involved to organizing. And I was from the very beginning because one of the main organizers in Rally Estonia used to be my co-driver. So I kind of know Urmo quite well and Silver, who's still one of the 1/3 of Rally Estonia basically. So they kind of invite me along to do some stuff with international people when they come along. When the circus come to Estonia, then need some experienced English-speaking people to kind of do some stuff around there. But that's basically it. Sometimes go to see the things, but
that idea of of transitioning away from transitioning away or accepting limitations or accepting how far you can go yourself. That's actually a common topic on this podcast because I've been thinking about it a lot with Comedy Estonia and as our group of comedians, as we grow and progress, not everyone is going to be Sander Õigus or Ari-Matti Mustonen. And not you can put in, just like with a sport, just like with a creativity, you can put in years of work, really genuinely hard work, and do all the stuff you're supposed to do, and you may not still pop. You may not pop, or you may get to a certain level, but not the highest of highs, and that's showbiz or that's sport. You can't dictate that and can't that. And it's something that as Comedy Estonia as a group has matured over the years, it's like, I don't think we've necessarily got a problem, but it's something that I'm thinking about right now because I think it's like how to address this. Logically, this will happen. I can, even if I look at myself, was doing a lot of stand-up like 5 years ago, was really that guy. I also took a side to run the business more and focus more on that. And that's really taken me away from the creativity. And I've had to also, because for us, I speak all the time on this podcast how stand-up is the most pure form of entertainment. If you've been a stand-up, it's like crack cocaine. It's the number one. And you can sing, you can, do a podcast, you can host an event, but it'll never be like stand-up. And we have to deal with that idea that not all of us will be that, or I've done enough and I'm happy with what I've done. And I don't have complete answers to this yet. I'm not quite sure, but it's something I keep in mind to sort of manage to make sure, because I can imagine that there's the getting out can be difficult, but it can have a little bit of trauma can go on there. A little bit of PTSD kind of stuff can happen.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's the case with anything you do in life. Is it like a relationship or a company or whatever, at some point, everything in life stops at some point. They're the lucky bastards who can, keep what they're doing for all their life and still be successful. So it is a good point you're making here. And I think, in my case, just as an example, looking back, of course, when you're doing the thing, you think you're like very good at it and all of that. But at some point, I knew my limits as well. And I knew I wasn't, maybe that good to be, world champion or something like that. Because back in the days, we only had Marco Martin. So everything that Ott is doing now, which is like beyond anything we really dreamed of. Of course, you dream about it, but you don't actually think that, some of us will be that guy. So, which is a funny story, actually, back in 2006, when Marco Martin was finishing his career in international level, he came to Estonia and formed a team of young drivers to kind of help them along to get to a WRC. So he didn't know who to choose, so he made kind of an audition, I would say, or so like a modeling thing. So it was like 2 days full of interviews and stuff and some driving and etc. So there were 6 guys in the selection. So I was one of them who got selected into the team. So we got the full packing from Marco and worked with him to get all his experience on board. Then there was another guy who's still driving rally, and the guy who was left out was Ott Tänak. So not maybe the best choice of Marco, but anyway, back in that time, it was maybe not that developed or ready for that position yet. But
could be. We all need time. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. He ended up in the same team that kind of was built around me, and the same engineers, and basically the same team is still running today. And Ott is the owner and the Marco, and they're still doing world championships and like the team manager is my co-driver and all of that. So I kind of, knew where it all began. But yeah, I was a bit early bird maybe, and maybe not that talented. And then looking back, I still see some guys who are still doing the championship, like, 12 years later. They're more or less at the same position that they were back in that time. So it kind of feels me that, don't you feel kind of a FOMO thing that, you're doing this for all your life? I admire people who are so passionate about something, but still, I've gone since finishing, I've gone to so many different fields in my life, doing, and then started sailing and stuff like that. So I'm like a captain in that field now. I have 3 stripes and stuff like that. So do a lot of, sea related thing, which doesn't relate at all to rallying. Did some business we already talked about. So in that sense, I kind of feel that I feel more like enriched like by the experiences, because I know that if I would do the rallying again, I would probably end up, in a similar position, maybe even less, because I'm not that, young anymore.
Right.
So it could be just fun. If at some point in my life I have so much money that I can just do it for fun, then of course it could be fun.
Right.
But it's just fun. It's not a sport.
Yeah, I look at that as well. Like I look at comedians who are still going, and I think you have to sort of be in it to understand. You can kind of see someone and go like, are they doing it just, sometimes they just do it and they just love it, right? They've found their niche. They're really happy where they are. I guess they've come to terms with that with themselves, and they understand it. They're comfortable with that idea. And I admire that. I'm like, wow, I wish I could be like that. And then I think instinctively you also see there are the others that you're like, oh, bro, like, come on.
Yeah, the same jokes. And
same jokes, same thing. We're not progressing.
Yeah.
Not so common in Estonia. Well, I guess because our scene is so relatively new, but certainly when we go to England and we're going to those open mics and you see that old bloke and you're like, I bet you haven't changed that act in 5 years.
Yeah.
I bet that's the same thing. And I'm sure there are analogies in rally as well.
Yeah, it's not about, I rather thought about jokes not as a comedian, but more like if I go to a service park of a rally and I see the same faces, and the gossip is the same, and the jokes are the same, and the whole experience is quite similar. Of course, things have changed a bit, but overall, the actual, the experience you get is similar. So, in my mind, if I was able to be a driver and kind of get the most fun part of it out of it, so I could do that. But just hanging around there and kicking tires is not really my thing, I think. So
it's a good way to think about it. Okay, I like the attitude. It's a good way to think about it and good way to deal with that and consider yourself. But
if Ott Tänak would have thought the same way, he would never be world champion.
Oh, okay. All right.
It has the other side as well.
Okay, so he struggled at first. He needed to find his form and find his footing.
If you look at the Ott Tänak, the movie, it tells the whole story of how he progressed. And he was a driver who was kicked out from 2 teams, I think even. So his career was over many times. He still crawled back, basically.
I wonder, is there a difference between, and I don't want, like, he got kicked. I didn't see the movie. I'm a terrible Estonian. I didn't go and see the movie. I'm sorry. He got kicked out. He had setbacks, but I think that's different to, I'm at a level. I stay at that level. It's the same. We do the same thing every 3 weekends or something like that. There's a little bit difference.
I think
the
thing with him was that he's just so good at it, and people who believed in him kind of, always, not always, but, they were a bit fed up with anything he did. He was crashing all the time and it didn't work at all. And he didn't really listen to anyone. That was the biggest problem. And, the rallying itself is not just driving. You're not just a stupid driver. It's a very intelligent sport. There's a lot of things to think about. And, the actual driving itself, it's not like a basketball that you have to be really skillful of doing stuff. It's in your mind, basically, what you're doing. So it's a little bit like dancing. Like if somebody, gives you the steps and kind of learns you the moves, you're not going to be winning any contests. So it all comes down to like an object moving in an environment. And it's a driver's head that has to use the car as an extension of his arm to kind of, realize that how fast I could actually, go in certain circumstances. So in that sense, it has a lot to do with natural talent, but also, you need to think about the things. So, he wasn't maybe really good at kind of listening to others and good advice. And, it's a very common mistake in young drivers. And I wasn't that much of a good listener as well, because you think you're so good and you know what you're doing. So, yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that the mindset I'm kind of explaining here is it not might be the right call for like anyone. And if you want to do, great things in sport, then most probably you need a different mindset. The only problem is that it's not really rewarding, because like 99% of people they're not going to be world champions. So if you want to be a world champion, you most probably have to take a bet and kind of go with it and do like anything you can to pursue it. Most probably you're going to fail. It's the same with startups and stuff like that.
Sure.
So you just have to understand that, okay, when the stopping is the right call and when it isn't. So
I think that idea of the young person with the skill, who's possibly a little bit arrogant. I mean, depends what you want to call arrogance, confidence, faith in their own ability. These terms can be used interchangeably, and we certainly have that. I mean, Comedy Estonia, we are a talent management agency, which means I've got these comedians, they're talented, and they're young and they need to be self-assured, but our job is to also guide them as managers. And it's to put that idea in their head, or that they get through our group, that you probably don't know everything. Let us help you. And developing that, developing that relationship. I call it to a group, I call it coachability. Like, we are looking for coachability in our comedians. And so, yeah, we want talent. Yes, I also need someone who's self-assured and has a big dream and a big goal and wants to do that. But I need that coachability talent. And Comedy Estonia has parted ways with comedians who I feel don't have the coachability talent. If I can't influence you, I'm not going to tell, I don't want to tell you what to do. It has to be, to use that analogy, it has to be a dance. It has to be a back and forth. Absolutely. Yep. Sometimes we're going to go with what you want, but then sometimes it's us and we meet in the middle. If without that coachability, I can't put a long-term effort into a comedian. It's both. It has to be like equal respect for both sides, and that also has to be developed. Though I get it, a young person doesn't necessarily have that. I understand.
There isn't any golden rule, and if that would exist, everybody would do it. So in that sense, in some cases it could be one thing, in some cases the other. The thing with Owen's example is just the talent was just so huge. And there were, some really smart people who realized that even before, others and before, he himself kind of realized what it is. And to be honest, knowing all of these people he relied on mostly, and I was a bit like a generation before, right? So we never really got to a point where we were actually like going head to head. And of course, he's way better than any of us. Like, he's basically the best in the world anyway.
Sure.
But anyway, the thing is that you have to understand the talent. There are a lot of talented people, but who you're going to invest into. And the thing with Owen's example is that the talent was so huge that, at some point people thought that, okay, let's give it another try, because, that's the only thing we have. And I think the logic behind it is that you can kind of polish people at some point, but you cannot, create the talent. So at some point, if the talent is really good, it might be easier to kind of, cut the corners than to have the perfect person that doesn't have a talent. So that was, and it was a big gamble because nobody actually thought, it is going to end up where he is now. Because, knowing the background, even I was like super impressed on the actual results he was, starting to get back in 2017 when joined Ford and all of that, when the kind of the popping thing happened. This was something that every formula that I know of, it didn't make sense. It was like, okay, you're good, you're getting better. And then at some point you're just over to the moon, which in logical terms is just absurd. Especially like being a specialist, if I look at the stages, look at the competition, look at the cars, all of the like inputs, and trying to understand that, okay, the competition is doing this kind of times, most probably Otis can end up with times around here. And he was just like a step or two or three better than everyone expected. And then was like, okay. So in the end, it all paid off. But it's a super rare example. It's just, I wouldn't say it's 1 in a million. I think it's like 1 in 100 million, something like that. So, but it is an inspiration. And if we don't talk about that and keep pushing people like that, then we're never ever going to find these like 1 in a million.
Right. Okay.
persons.
Not everyone will do it, but okay. Otherwise, we'll never find it if we don't.
Yeah,
You're probably not going to be Otanak, but give it a go anyway.
It is a gamble, so you never know. And if you don't try, and I always tell people that, from my experience being as a rally driver, I wouldn't say I'm benefiting nowadays that too much of the driving side, but I'm hugely benefited by the psychological side of it. So I always kind of tell people that, young people should do something that they're super good at to a certain level where it gets kind of tough and where it gets competitive and kind of, to a point where they have to kind of, overachieve a bit and kind of understand the psychological tools that they have inside to get the best out of them. And I think I'm super grateful of that experience, because rallying is a super good kind of, any sport basically is. I always say that the sport is a model of life. It's a small model, and you have all the emotions in one really simple thing. If it's like a game, like a football or whatever, it's a team game. You basically have, most of the emotions and challenges you feel in general life are already there, but it's just 90 minutes on a field. So it's like a small model that you can play around with. Nobody gets killed and nobody, loses a fortune. It's just a game. But it teaches you a lot. So I especially like now, leading a business, and, there are a lot of tensions around as well. And event business is something that's, involves a lot of pressure. So I find it much easier to deal with because I've used to, work with pressure, and I've used to work with achieving stuff. And I usually, if I take myself a goal, I usually achieve, results more or less where I want them to be. So this is a huge benefit. And if you're a young person coming from a high school, school system doesn't really push you that much. The final exams are not that hard to do. So what happens is that if you're a person who have a background of, being a comedian, being a sportsman, it could be a singer or whatever it is, that's, something that you're good at, and you've been doing it for years and kind of learned from it. It's super beneficial in your latter life as well to just use the psychological kind of lessons learned thing.
I think also the lessons, as an extension of that, certainly, is that one of the downsides of living in our wonderful but small country is that maybe the challenges aren't so large sometimes just inside of here. You can be the best at something or near the top at something potentially, and you had that international experience to see like, oh shit, there's a lot of really talented. We can live in our bubble here and think I'm pretty good, Yeah,
that's the thing. When we were Estonian, like overall champions in rallying, which basically is the fastest guy in Estonia in that year in Estonian championship. And then Marco Martin was the team leader and the mentor, and he was like, yeah, good, yeah, fine. And then, I thought that, we're getting somewhere. And then we went to a World Rally Championship, and then was like, fuck. It's just like totally different level. And I have to agree that, and Marco's always, what he said, that there's no point to go anywhere if you're not best here. You have to beat everyone here. And then you go somewhere, because if you're average here, then you're gonna be really low anywhere else. I was maybe a bit too young to understand everything he said back at that time. Although he was kind of a guy to look up to, but still I was maybe too young. Looking back to it now, I kind of realized that what he actually meant with something he said to me. Back in that time, I was like kind of trying to argue with him that I know better how to do things, and maybe there was some points that I got to do things my own way as well. But still, a young person, especially in a competitive environment, it's not so easy thing to learn to listen as well.
Sure. I'm just going to have a quick toilet break, and then we'll just do another little bit talking about events right now and where Estonian event has changed tracks completely. Hold on for a moment. Yeah. Good, we'll keep there after Lewis's little toilet break. To change topics and to keep us moving along, events. So to set some picture for the people watching, YOLOS, to use a very quick term, does corporate events. Companies hire you to do and you said large companies or startups or something like that. And I guess the comparison that I'm just trying to draw for our listeners is the difference is, okay, Comedy Estonia is putting on events, but we're selling tickets to members of the public, and anyone can buy a ticket where you're doing things for companies.
Event is a very broad term anyway. This is an event here at the moment.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess they're the two perspectives and two different ways that we're trying to talk about how I'm just interested in how people are feeling. And I wonder, how do you think the general public is feeling about going to an event right now in October 2021?
It's changing very rapidly, I would say. Well, what I've learned with last year and a half being in the pandemic is that the public's opinion is changing a bit slower than the actual restrictions are changing, meaning that when there isn't any restrictions yet, then people are we're not really, maybe we shouldn't go somewhere, and then they're a bit afraid. Once they take the restrictions out, then after that people are still a bit cautious. Then at some point it kind of disappeared during the summer, and I think now at the moment there are some people who are hesitant, but not too many of them. Most of the people have kind of made peace with it and kind of realized that we can do something when we have vaccinations and tests and all of that. So there are a bunch of people who are not bothered at all. But if you look at the numbers, then they should be worried already. So the strange thing is that I see that this autumn is a bit different. Not only the public opinion, I think the government's opinion as well is a bit changed in a way that looking at the numbers, this was a point in, I think, something around February, where they closed everything down on the same numbers we have at the moment. But, at the moment, everything basically is allowed. So I think the vaccination is something that they strongly believe in, and, public opinion also believes in some ways, maybe not justified, because vaccinated people can still spread the disease, basically. So in that sense, the event shouldn't be allowed at all. But I think everybody has understood that this thing cannot go on forever, and we have to live with it. So I think now the opinion is that we try to do things as safe as possible. And if something happens, somebody gets ill, then that's the way it is. And nothing, it used to be a main news when somebody had some kind of an outburst in some of the event, but nowadays it's not a big deal anymore. And it's really hard to predict because, as I said, it changes quite rapidly. But I think this winter still is going to be better than it was last year because just the positivity is higher and people are not maybe that afraid anymore.
I wonder, so as we talk in October 2021, the numbers are high like they were in February, but we don't have that. So we're balancing off, right? Everyone's sick of a lockdown. Everyone can't take it anymore, where we've already, I guess, in some ways proved the negative benefits to a society of being locked down. Yes, okay, we could be inside and not spread the virus, but then we found out there's a whole bunch of other negatives by keeping mental health, finance, economy, all of that. I do wonder, I got to say, are we not getting anything because we're 2 weeks away from an election right now? I wonder what's around the corner with that.
That could be the thing, but listening to the general kind of message that comes out from the government mindset is that they're trying to keep the economy open. That's the main thing. And as you said, there are, different sides of the story. You can, make restrictions to one side, but, you have to take care of the others as well. And I think now they understood that they've kind of pushed certain sectors so much that they cannot do it anymore. And I think a big change is the number of people being in a hospital. I think that's the biggest difference we have. The numbers being, people being infected is the same, but the people in hospital is the main thing that they're looking at the moment, which is way lower than it was in February. So in that sense, I think they're kind of considering that, okay, some of the people might be ill and, with symptoms at home, and we can live with it. And understand that this is the way they're trying to do. Of course, they are tightening the bolts at some point, but most probably not that tight as they were last year.
I'm wondering that too. So with Comedy Estonia events, we now, for our theatre shows, we have on-site testing with a medical professional there. I'm sure you've been doing that quite a lot with your events as well, having on-site testing. And we check, like last night at Venekatorikeskus for Daniel Sloss show, we've got 5 people checking certificates to make sure everything goes through. So, but on the other hand, I'm just happy to run an event. Okay, fine. I'll get 5, I'll get 5 comedians. They'll stand there and make that work. I think a lot of it is, I don't want to say, I do think look, we are following the rules, I guess. And I guess we have to be seen to be following the rules as well. I'm not sure those people care that much, which is an interesting side. You go to the mall, I see all kinds of people don't give a shit. I'm not sure how much people care, but I think as a visibly large event organizer, we have to at least be seen to be doing it. And I don't think it's just lip service. I do actually think, we're doing the right thing at that event. But so much of it is a judgment call. Like they come and they've got some certificate from someplace, I don't know, or some Estonian, it's a stamp from some family doctor in Estonia with a signature. And yesterday I'm like, well, I guess you did the right thing. There's no kind of strict rule here. And we all have to make these judgment calls when letting people in and just think, okay, do I think so?
It is complicated a bit, but as a general rule, it's still way safer than back in the days we did nothing.
Right.
So in that sense, I think it helps a lot. It is complicated. There are rules actually to every exception, but it's very complicated. We have a special person in YOLOS who are familiarized himself with all of the rules and is trying to understand how it works. And in our case, we do events where we actually test everyone. But of course, being a corporate event, you have more budget and more flexibility of doing stuff. So
right, more ability to say you're just gonna get tested. That's how it goes.
I would say that still, I feel safer when it's an event like that, and we do a lot of events. Basically everything we do nowadays, we test all the crew members, like all the technicians, etc., etc. So. Because we want to keep our business open and we don't want to go back to the studio for the whole winter. So in that sense, I think, especially in a corporate world, the corporate clients are more taking it more seriously than the actual government restrictions. Because the big difference with us is that if you look the restrictions from the legal point of view, then all of the restrictions are meant for public events. They don't really regulate the private events at all. It's just impossible, basically, with the laws we have. So, because basically it's really hard to draw a line between you having a birthday at your home, which is like your private space, or like a big bank having their birthday and having like 2,000 people. So basically, it's really hard to draw the line. So basically, we shouldn't follow any rules, but we do to be respectful. And usually the clients are taking it more seriously than the state is. So in that sense, it's not really a big problem of corporate events not following the rules. It's the other way around, and we usually have a lot of budget to kind of organize everything and have the professional team to check everything. So I would say that it's working well, even with numbers like we have at the moment. We just had 2 weeks ago an event for 1,500 people, and I think we found like 1 or 2 cases there.
With the testing at the door.
Testing is one thing, and after the event we didn't really have any problems or reports that people getting ill. I think there were 1 or 2 or 3 cases of few people who were ill, but they were not really directly connected to the event. So I think like statistically, and you don't really see the news that people went to a theater and everybody got ill.
Right. No.
Which should be logical, because I understand that this Delta version is super efficient. So yeah, I'm just hoping that sensibility is kind of a drive force, and we still move on with the vaccination a bit, because we this industry is kind of dependent on that.
I think we've had one. I'm trying to think of one that I know of at a Comedy Estonia event where we got contacted. I think it was. I forget which channel, how it came to us, but they were at the show and they had an infection, and then I think, did it come through Pileta Levi, or we went to Pileta Levi, and then we say, okay, who was around them? And that's the last I heard of it. After that, there was sort of, we identified, Pileta Levi could tell us who was around in that theater, and that was it. But just that one time. When we were, I'm a little bit fascinated by I'm always fascinated by the bubble we've got in Estonia, how we perceive things here and how things are externally. And I know we spoke briefly a little while ago that we have a sense of confidence here in Estonia. Okay, people are doing events. I still think there's, I would estimate it, looking at Comedy Estonia, I think there's about 30 to 40% drop off that, for our events. How can you actually definitely say that? But at least 30% of attendances are down, even though we have testing at venues. As you say, people are scared, might be worried for whatever reason. For whatever reason, even though they can get a test, they don't want to come. They might be vaxxed, but don't want to expose themselves. They might not be vaxxed, but still just be like, or not understand, or something like that. Or we're also quite considerate of that. The test costs more money. And that's always more money. And we managed to screw the cost of the test down to €6. It was 8, and then we got it down to 6, because we also understood that's essentially 8 extra euros on top of your ticket, especially going to Ari these days. It's 20, or Daniel Sloss was 35, of course, international act. So, you're starting to creep up.
Yeah, there. That's a funny thing that in a corporate world, we don't have that at all. Actually, we have it the other way around, because corporate events were not around for a few years, I would say even. So what we're seeing now today is that attendance rates are higher, like way higher than they used to be. And the good thing about this that the events are a bit simpler as well. You don't need to jump out of the cake anymore to kind of get people along. They're just coming because it's an event.
Just a good, solid event.
Yeah,
you just got to run.
Basically, you see people, there's food, there's drinks, there's entertainment, and that's it.
It was a bit of an almost like a Cold War-y arms racy thing going on before the pandemic, right? Who's got the cooler event? Who's got the crazier thing?
Yeah. Now it doesn't exist anymore. Well, it does exist, but still, it's a bit simpler. I always compare it to to having a bad day at work, what do people usually do? They go home, they take ice cream and wine or beer or something. The simple things. Right. You go to higher dimensions where everything else is fulfilled, all the needs you have. So in that sense, we usually today see that the attendance rates are quite okay, I would say, which is a bit odd, but. Yeah,
for you guys. Are you seeing, you had mentioned offhandedly that there was still, while some Estonian companies were quite confident in that, there was still some companies that were international with international head offices were still seeing some hesitation, coming from head office, not appreciating. Are you still seeing a bit of that?
That's a big difference, yeah. I would say that mostly Estonian-based companies or companies who can make decisions here are more open than the ones that are internationally managed. And there are companies around where people haven't been in the office since the start of pandemic still, which is a super raw thing for us. But I think it's all based to corporate responsibility. It's just something that's growing super fast, and brands are not that corporate anymore. They're more like behaving like persons and kind of sharing the same values that modern people have, and this kind of taking care of people, policies, and kind of responsibility of being a good employee and employer as well on the other side is so high that they're just overcautious at some point. But luckily it's changing a bit, and at some point they understand that we have especially companies who are growing really fast. They see that half of our employees have never seen each other in real life, so we need to do something because people are just gonna leave because they don't have the culture feeling. So now we kind of see that even companies who hesitated before, they're still cautiously taking first steps and trying to do the thing they used to do, and this was the effect that we saw in the last few months. August, September were, I think, one of the busiest in our industry that we've ever seen, because everything happened at once, especially all the events that summer things and all of that. But added to that were events that were cancelled, plus the events that are usually taking place in winter or spring, because people don't want to keep them in the springtime anymore because they know it's not going to happen. So they move everything into August. So that was just a super hectic time to everyone who's still alive in the industry.
I have a question that I think it's just a personal thing. It would help us at Comedy Estonia with your what do you call crystal ball? Sorry, of foretelling the future. This large amount of events which is going on and happening, we would typically see some sort of drop off after the new year. We've seen that less in previous years as companies have put December's too packed, too expensive. We're going to push it into January. Do you see that trend keeping on going, that it's just going to be chock? It's just going to be solid with events through January, February?
I think looking at the winter season, I don't see big change in terms of the COVID restriction. For the summer, people are choosing the dates. Let's do it in August or September because most probably it's the best time in terms of the COVID. The winter is bad time anyway, so it doesn't really matter if it's February or March or January. The tendency you talked about, that pushing stuff from the December, is something we've seen for years, and this is something that we've been recommending for years to do things in January. And now when we look at our workflow, the January, February is way higher than it is in December. I think it's something to do with the profile that we have in terms of the clients as well, because most of the end user based clients are super busy in December and you just don't have time to do anything there. But that's quite logical. But I wouldn't say that. I think one thing that's definitely changed is the time gap that you're gonna give to the actual organizing of the event. So the reason for that is that decisions are being made super late, because nobody knows what's gonna come. So I wouldn't say that I can already see what's gonna happen in January or February, because we don't have too many briefs for that period yet, which is quite weird, because usually during that time we already have everything in place. So I even today we see briefs that are coming in for the events to be happening within a few weeks.
Wow. And you've just got to be like, this is all we can do in a few weeks. Is what can be accomplished in a few weeks.
Sadly, there are a lot of stuff that we cannot do because, as I said, everybody's super busy, not only in our office, and we're expanded a lot. We're like 17 people. Before the crisis, there were like 8 or something like that. So we're expanded like, twice as big as we were.
It's very impressive.
But we still kind of, are not able to kind of fulfill the demand at the moment because, we're more into kind of a quality side of thing as well. And a lot of, big projects that take, half a year to organize and stuff like that. So we have to prioritize the like loyal customer work first, meaning that if you're super late in deciding, then you just might not get the service. And other thing is the resources as well on the market, like everything that you use for events, because like event is basically most of the services we're outsourcing. Sure. Companies, doing catering or technicians or like virtual broadcasts and stuff, they're super busy and they're super tired because they've had crazy August and September, which is super bizarre because most of these companies in the springtime were the ones that got aid from the government and kind of financial aid to just keep them floating. So it was kind of a payback time.
Fair enough.
So who was still around, and sadly, a lot of companies lost a lot of employees because there was just nothing to do for them. So it's a bit bizarre. I would say the whole crisis thing in our industry is that, in one way, in our example, I would say, like looking back, it was a good thing because we made a huge step forward and kind of push ourselves to develop stuff that we otherwise wouldn't have done, especially on the virtual side of things. So in the end, I think it was okay. I wouldn't do it again, but it's still kind of, push yourself out from the comfort zone thing a bit.
Sure.
So market has kind of reshaped and a lot of players have gone and some new came and all that. So it was kind of a fresh air thing, but I kind of have a feeling it's not over yet, so let's not make the conclusions just yet. So
I think you might be right. I don't want to take up too much of your time, Martin, but just to end it, I just wanted to talk about, you are involved, or you're the leader, the Marketing Association in Estonia.
The Marketing Association is basically a roof that covers all of the marketing agencies, brands like PR, events, all of that as well. The most kind of visible thing we do is Kuldmuna, which is basically like marketing awards. So they have a board and one of the board members. Mostly being an event marketing person, I deal with everything related to events. Because most of the event agencies are part of the association. So I kind of try to be the representative of the agency's voice, whatever needs to be done. If there's a radio show to talk about how life is going on in the event industry, then they usually call me because I have this kind of a position.
Sure. And I didn't even know you were part of that. I just called you because I knew you, and I was like, hey, you want to come on my podcast? But you, the thing I wanted to get to was, though, that you have been directly involved with the previous government and the current government. They've brought your organization in, and you specifically have been on some of these meetings. It's these interesting things as part of the industry. Someone in that industry, you hear about it. Oh, we've listened. And we're like, okay, have you? Like, how? I guess just tell us a little bit about your experience of the going to talk with the government. Do you think they got it? I don't know. Tell us about that.
I think generally, I think they got it. Okay. Because Estonia is a small country and everybody knows someone, and it's really thin, the actual government itself. The system is huge, the ministries and stuff like that, but the actual government itself, there is just a bunch of people doing the work, and it is not too many of them. So I think that they understood from the very beginning, actually, what the situation is, because the situation was so bad that you have to be a total idiot not to understand it. The problem was that there wasn't any good solutions around, which is also understandable, because most of the work we did with them from the beginning, because I was the one to trying to be the voice of event organizers and explaining that we're in trouble because we were the first basically the first hit section together with tourism, basically, because it was all forbidden. So the first thing we did was trying to explain our position, because usually event management is a kind of business that you do on a background. People don't know you. People don't really think about, how stuff happens.
Sure.
So we're not really kind of explaining that maybe too well to society. But then we went to politicians that listen, that we're representing a country here. You're a politician. You need events. You have a large conference. Angela Merkel is going to come to a visit. Who's going to serve the thing? So you need these people. So I think they kind of got the point. And then we were dealing with all of these aid programs to companies that who might get some kind of a support from the government and all of that. Of course, our industry is so small that we usually ended up in some big bucket of different things they were coming up with. We usually run together with people from the tourism. Basically, there are 30,000 people working in the tourism industry, so it's way better, a bigger sector. But our looking at the corporate and kind of a conference side of events, we usually do the same thing. So I think all in all, it was quite a refreshing experience in that sense that Estonia is so small that you can quite easily access people. You can, just basically call to a prime minister and explain what you want. And we, from the very beginning, we actually saw from the ministries as well that there was a really kind of a supportive environment, in a sense that they were trying to help. Situation was new for everyone. Nobody really knew what to do. Of course, the easiest thing would be to just, throw out the money out of the helicopter, basically, which doesn't work because there isn't enough money for everyone anyway. So you have to know at some point that, who do you support? I think the biggest problem with our sector was that it was impossible to tell who is who. And that was the trickiest part, and still is, actually.
What do you mean by that?
If a government makes a decision that, okay, we are going to support event organizers, then who are the actual companies that they're going to give the money out, and how do you actually do it? So they, at one point, it was down to Enterprise Estonia to manage it all. So you have to, come up with some kind of a filter. The problem is that, okay, we have the marketing association, we have most of the agencies are there, but they're not just agencies, it's Comedy Estonia, there's concert organizers, it's loads of different level of companies, most of them super small, just few persons doing, Onion Festival in Peipsi. Sure. So how do you do it, and how do you select companies who are, one thing that was very clear from the government was that we only want to help these companies that are going to survive, because there's no point to pump money into dead horse. Sure. So how do you know that?
Yeah.
So that was tricky, and if you're like a tourism company, then you have a certificate from the state that you organize tourism trips. Easy. You can just take the numbers from the registry and that's it. So that was a big problem. But yeah, overall, I would say that I was positively surprised how willing they were to help, and how much kind of attention we got comparing to a size of an industry. Because we got to meet the prime minister in the government building. We, I think, 2 or 3 times met the ministry, head ministry in our field. So in that sense, they all kind of were trying to help, and there were companies that actually got the help as well. So, but of course, it's not a magic thing that's going to solve all the problems. So, yeah.
Hopefully we can run events. All right. And that was interesting. But anyway, Martin, I think we'll leave it there for today. It's a Friday afternoon. We'll get out and do. You got some events tonight, or what's on?
Yeah, we have one running at the moment. One Coke event. But I think it should be over soon. Okay. We had few this week, but good. Being a creative director, then I'm not really on the field that much anymore. We have a super talented production team to do it. So
That I understand.
It's my job to talk in the radio shows.
We had Daniel Sloss 2 nights this week, so that was a big thing. And actually, I think tonight Sander is in Vanamoina and Tartu. But again, yeah, I've got professionals to take care of that, so I'm going to have a weekend off. I haven't had one for a while. So
yeah, cool.
Enjoy anyway, that. Martin, thank you very much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.